Hi, this is Jana Lunden, founder of the Natural Women's Council. Tonight, I'm going to be exposing RTE, Ireland's national public service media organisation, for what I feel is their failure to safeguard the children of Ireland, despite the fact that I've provided them with many details on the issue that we have been campaigning against the Natural Women's Council, Lawyers for Justice Ireland, Parents' Rights Alliance and Irish Education Alliance. I received a letter from RTE on Friday the 19th of May as I was away for my college graduation. I opened my email, Facebook Messenger actually, only to find this 2-page letter from them giving me a very tight deadline of Tuesday to reply with my right to reply, which I did. I'm going to also read you my 8-page right to reply and also some of the books that I included in the document that I sent to them. So without further ado, I'm going to read this letter from RTE. Dear Miss London, RTE Primetime is preparing a report for broadcast in the near future about a new form of public protest, which involves confronting individuals in the course of their work and holding them personally responsible for their organizations or employers' policies and or that of the government. Members of the public subjected to this form of protest report feeling afraid and intimidated and say they perceive such protests as threatening and aggressive. In this regard, I am writing to you in your role as spokeswoman for the Irish Education Alliance, which began as an anti-vaccination and anti-mask campaign group for the children during the COVID-19 pandemic, with a current campaign against what you describe as, quote, the pushing of gender ideology on children. As a result, your campaign group has mounted a series of protests at public libraries calling for the removal of certain LGBTQ+ books for young adults, seeking the removal from libraries' young adult section and as reference books for secondary school teachers. I am seeking your comment on the following matters which we intend to carry in our report. On your website and in your speeches, you refer to the holding of these books in the, quote, young adult section of libraries as constituting a violation of the Children First Act 2015 and as, quote, an example of sexual abuse. During February, March, and April, some people associated with your campaign carried out a series of protests at a central library in Cork City, accusing librarians of being ignorant of grooming and not caring about children because these books were held in the library. Furthermore, these accusations were made while your associates filmed librarians without their consent and posted these video clips on social media. In addition to public libraries and bookshops, your organization has mounted protests at the premises of the charity Children's Books Ireland and outside the Department of Education on Marlborough Street, where on placards and in public speeches, these LGBTQ+ books have been labeled as pornographic, and those who give access to them as being groomers and pedophiles. At your protest at the premises of Children's Books Ireland on April 26, you called out the name of the CEO of the charity, Elena Ryan, on a megaphone during a protest on a quiet residential street. Members of your group also made comments which residents who were opposed to the protest taking place on their private property found to be rude and aggressive. Requests by residents to protesters to leave their private property were ignored for a period during which time residents were repeatedly asked if they supported grooming and were filmed without consent. On April 26, at the General Post Office in Dublin 1, you mounted a protest and spoke on a megaphone despite it being a private space, which is only licensed for public use as a post office. This led to members of An Garda Síochána being called to escort you and associates off the premises. In a recent protest on May 10th at the Department of Education, when a counter-protester threw water at you, members of your group subsequently kicked the protester while the protester was on the ground. Some associated with your group, namely Ross Lahive, Andy Heisman, Fergus Power, and Kevin Coyle, who are present at your protests, also frequently attend anti-asylum seeker protests, which are hosted by the Irish Freedom Party and other well-known anti-immigrant groups. They have also mounted campaigns against COVID vaccines in pharmacies. On your Twitter account, you retweet well-known extreme activist posts and publicly state your opposition to several issues, amongst them COVID vaccinations, climate change mitigation measures, and transgender rights. You also referred to Angara Síochána's gay pride campaign as a radical ideological political agenda, which is infiltrating every aspect of society like an octopus with poisonous tentacles. If you wish to comment on the above issues by way of an on-camera interview or by way of a written right to reply, I would ask that you respond to me by 5:30 p.m. on Tuesday, May 23rd, to meet our production deadline. Thank you. Yours sincerely, Una Smith, journalist, Primetime RTE. So that's the letter RTE sent to me, and I'm now going to read my right of reply, which I sent to RTE on the following Tuesday. Further to your correspondence, I wish to put on record, firstly, that this correspondence in itself represents a breach of the Broadcasting Authority of Ireland Code of Practice. Specifically, RTE is under a statutory obligation in accordance with Section 42(2)b to ensure that the treatment of current affairs, including matters which are either of public controversy or the subject of current public debate, is fair to all interest concerns, and that the broadcast matter is presented in an objective and impartial manner and without any expression of the broadcaster's own views. I will address each paragraph of your correspondence in chronological order. The journalist Una Smith not only has demonstrated a biased lack of impartiality in her letter to me, but is also factually incorrect in her assertions. One glaring inaccuracy is that Ms. Smith states that I am a spokeswoman for the Irish Education Alliance. There would be a reasonable expectation that a journalist would get her basic facts correct. In addition, it is reasonable to conclude that this journalist is directing a witch hunt vilification of me as an individual, rather than refer to the fact that the campaign to safeguard children from exposure to inappropriate, sexually explicit material in our public libraries is, in fact, a collective group exercise by the Natural Women's Council, Irish Education Alliance, Lawyers for Justice Ireland, Parents' Rights Alliance. The campaign is supported on a grassroots basis by men and women across the country, including parents, teachers, grandparents, psychotherapists, doctors, and many other professionals. I note with interest in your first paragraph that you state you're preparing a report about a new form of public protest, which involves confronting individuals in the course of their work and holding them personally responsible for their employers' policies or that of the government. I am bemused that you are suggesting that this is a new form of public protest in view of the fact that holding public servants to account is deeply rooted in the history of protest movements. I would like to be clear that public libraries are paid for by the taxpayer, and those involved in the functioning and operating of same are accountable for their actions to the public. Librarians, as public sector workers, are responsible to uphold professional and statutory duties to safeguard children. It is disappointing, but not surprising, that RTE portrays public servants who have been firmly but peacefully challenged as victims, rather than the children who have been or could have been exposed to harm by the inclusion of sexually inappropriate material in our schools, or the children's section of public libraries of this issue is not addressed. Furthermore, contrary to what is suggested in your correspondence, the fact that some of these books are LGBTQ+ is not what is relevant or at issue. The fact that they contain inappropriate, sexually explicit content and are categorized for age 12+ children is what is relevant and what you appear to be ignoring. Paragraph 2. In the second paragraph of the said letter, Una Smith shows her bias and prejudice by referring to anti-vaccination and anti-mask campaign groups for children, which is separate and distinct to the library campaign to safeguard children to exposure to harmfully sexually explicit material. I note that Ms. Smith's primetime broadcast on children wearing face masks in primary schools received enormous public backlash, with parents and viewers labeling it as awful, given the lack of balance with the broadcaster advocating vaccinating and masking primary school children. I am therefore not surprised that Ms. Smith has demonstrated no understanding of child safeguarding principles when addressing the sexually explicit library books in question. RTE has repeatedly failed to permit meaningful and evidence-based public debate on any of the issues that you have mentioned, in particular in the attempt to discredit me while shamelessly propagating one side of an argument and failing to report on numerous issues which are of public concern, including vaccine injuries and deaths, an issue of huge sensitivity in loved ones. Of RTE's Director General Noel Curran from 2011 when he vowed to restore the station's good name for investigative journalism following the Father Reynolds scandal. He said, quote, "Few media organizations can thrive without their faith, and for a publicly owned media service, that bond is fundamental." RTE has, in my view, let down the public and failed to honor the vow made by Mr. Curran. This is why the public are increasingly losing complete faith in our national broadcaster, for we are not given a voice, but instead vilified as extremists, unjustly labeled and misrepresented by RTE. Paragraph 3. Your description of the library campaign has demonstrated that you have no understanding whatsoever of the reason behind the assemblies at public libraries. If Ms. Smith had any intention of investigating the reason for the library campaign, she would have made contact with me for a background and would have researched the information before making unfounded assumptions. Fundamentally, Ms. Smith does not address the crux and reason for the assemblies at the public libraries. Perhaps Ms. Smith should go back to the drawing board as a journalist and refresh what she was taught when studying for her career. By taking time to research this extremely concerning child safeguarding matter. Ms. Smith may also wish to familiarize herself with RTE's own safeguarding statement, as this may shed some light on the reasons for the assembly at the public libraries and why we are upholding our legal, moral, and ethical duty and right to protect the welfare of all children. Had Ms. Smith properly researched this matter from our social media updates, including Facebook, Twitter, the website, she would have discovered that an assembly at the public library was not the first step, but the last step in taking action to safeguard our children. Our collective campaign involved public libraries on notice that the groups in question contravened the Children First Act 2015 and the United Nations Convention on the Rights of our Child. Specifically, the public library, just like RTE, are under a statutory obligation to ensure that all reasonable steps are taken so that children are not exposed to potential harm. Harm, as defined under the Children First Act 2015, includes sexual abuse. In accordance with TUSLA's own guidance on sexual abuse, exposure to sexually explicit material comes under this definition. I will now refer to RTE's Child Safeguarding Statement, which was effective the 9th of the 11th, 2021. Indeed, in RTE's Child Safeguarding Statement, RTE state that the purpose of this document is to identify and address any risk of children arising from and during RTE activities. On page 7 and section 1, sexual abuse is defined as exposing the child to sexual activity directly or through pornography. The content of the material, the children's section of the public libraries, pornographic. In the sexual abuse section, it states to refer to Appendix 1 of this Child Safeguarding Statement, where an extract from Chapter 2 of the Children First National Guidance for Protection and Welfare of Children 2017 is reproduced. This extract outlines examples of child sexual abuse. Please refer also to Appendix 2 of this Child Safeguarding Statement, where Schedule 3 to the Children First Act 2015, which defines sexual abuse in relation to a child, is reproduced. We have also quoted the Children First Act 2015 in both our letter campaigns and our public assemblies. On page 8, in section 2 of RTE's own Child Safeguarding Statement, you state that the purpose of this document is to identify and address any risk of harm to children arising from and during RTE activities, and it seeks to ensure compliance with the Children First Act of 2015, ensure compliance with non-statutory best practice, including the 2017 Children First Guidance, and set out a clear procedure for RTE servants and or agents to adopt in ensuring child abuse and neglect are reported to the Child and Family Agency and or on Garda Síochána. and enable the reporting to the Child and Family Agency of any harm or ill treatment of a child as defined earlier in this statement. On page 9, section 3, under 3.4.2, it states the RTE wishes to maintain the highest possible standards to meet its responsibility to protect and safeguard children, and will uphold the key principle that the welfare of the child is paramount. Our statement is informed by the Children First Act of 2015, the 2017 Children First National Guidance for the Protection and Welfare of Children, the 1989 United Nations Convention on the Rights of a Child, and related legislation such as the Child Care Acts 1991 to 2015, the Protections for Persons Reporting Child Abuse 1998, the National Vetting Bureau Acts 2012 to 2016, and the Criminal Justice Withholding of Information on Offenses Against Children and Vulnerable Persons Act of 2012. Regardless of whether those legal instruments and legislation place duties and or obligations on RTE or not. On page 9, section 3 of RTE's Child Safeguarding Statement under Risk Assessment, it states, RTE has developed the statement having assessed the risk that may arise to the safety of children while participating in or interacting with RTE activities. The risk assessment is set out in section 4 of the statement. It operates as follows: to examine all circumstances in which RTE interacts with or provides services to children in order to establish whether there are any features which may have the potential to put children at risk. On page 14 of RTE's Child Safeguarding Statement, under Risk and Assessment and Procedures for Managing Risks, it includes harm to children arising from broadcasting material relating to identifiable children and broadcasting material that might cause harm to children. On page 15, it includes harm to children arising from accessing inappropriate material on RTE websites and harm to children arising from accessing inappropriate material on RTE social media accounts. On page 16, it includes harm to children arising from children accessing inappropriate material. And on page 20, under Procedure for Reporting Child Protection Concerns, it states in 4.5.1 that servants and or agents of RTE are obligated to report any reasonable grounds for suspicion that a child has been harmed, is being harmed, or will be harmed to the designated liaison person as soon as it is reasonably practicable after the suspicion arose. The libraries in question were asked to produce the Child Safeguarding Statement and risk assessment pertaining to the Rainbow Reads book list in question. They were asked to produce these in accordance with their statutory duties under the Children First Act of 2015 as a relevant service provider. To date, numerous letters requesting this have been ignored in breach of the legislation. I trust that RTE is fully cognizant that a child's welfare is paramount and that in all instances their best interests come first. I am interested that in paragraph 3 of your letter, you refer to the young adult section as the Rainbow Reads books were in fact found in the age 12 to 17 years of age section. Under the Children First Act of 2015, children are defined as under the age of 18. Paragraph 5. In light of the fact that TUSLA's guidance specifically states that exposing a child to sexually explicit material is defined as sexual abuse, and RTE's own definition includes sexually explicit material, I would invite you, RTE, as part of the broadcast, to read out the following content from the Rainbow Read book so that your viewers may decide if this material is appropriate for children. Please see also the attached document with photos from a few books we are demanding be moved from the age 12 to 17 children section into the adult section. I am sure that you will agree that topics such as fisting, anal sex, handies, blowies, letting a guy come in your mouth, dry humping, using a dating app to meet adults, ordering hormones online, and learning how to inject them surely are in violation of the Children First Act 2015 and RTE's own Child Safeguarding Statement. Paragraph 6. First of all, I would like to point out that I cannot be responsible for other people who carry out their own assemblies at public libraries, as I have no control over this. I do not condone any violence, and our assemblies are always communicated as a peaceful assembly. Your letter states to me that members of my group subsequently kicked the protester whilst the protester was on the ground. This is a false and defamatory statement. I must be clear that I intend to fully defend my integrity and good character and will take whatever steps necessary to do so should this allegation be broadcast. You state that the protesters accuse librarians of being ignorant and grooming and not caring about children because these books are held in their libraries. I would reiterate that if RTE Primetime is to present this matter in an impartial light, it is important that the content of the material as cited above is read out during the broadcast. One cannot possibly present this fundamental issue in an impartial light without referring to the material that instigated the campaign to safeguard the welfare of children. Clearly, librarians have a professional and statutory duty to safeguard children and should be fully aware of the content of the Rainbow Read books promoted in the children's section. Paragraph 7. I have no control over what other members of the public may or may not do in a public library. The library campaign on the website clearly addresses the steps to take, such as, please be respectful towards librarians and library staff. The full details of the campaign we launched can be found on irisheducationalliance.com/library campaign 2023. With regards to recording librarians and posting this on social media, again, I have no control over what others may or may not do when in a public library. Paragraph 8. You state that at the public assembly outside Children's Books Ireland and Department of Education, placards referred to the Rainbow Read books as pornographic, and those who give access to these are groomers and pedophiles. What is correct is that the signs we displayed do refer to these books as pornographic, and I would suggest that Ms. Smith refers to the above cited content to RTE's Child Safeguarding Designated Liaison Officer to profess an opinion on the content of these books, which should be fully examined and recategorized with urgency. With regards to any national reference or any reference to groomers, this was specifically transposed from the Toothless Children's First Act National Guidelines 2017, which state that sexual abuse includes showing sexually explicit material to children, which is often a feature of the grooming process by perpetrators of abuse. There are no exclusions under the Children First National Guidelines 2017 for state bodies. Therefore, librarians and libraries must adhere to these guidelines and be held to account just like any individual in society. Ultimately, RTE, in their Child Safeguarding Risk Assessment, refer to the Children First Act 2015, the Children First National Guidance 2017, and the UN Convention on the Rights of a Child. Libraries, just like RTE, are under a statutory duty an obligation to adhere to legislation to safeguard children. Paragraph 9. As to regards to the assembly at Children's Books Ireland on the 26th of April 2023, we were exercising our right to free speech outside a public building on a public street. Again, Ms. Smith has not researched or asked us about the background of the assembly. Elena Ryan, CEO of Children's Books Ireland, is accountable for her organization's actions. Children's Books Ireland endorsed and improved the Rainbow Read list, now rebranded as the Pride Reading List, and to date have refused to furnish a child safeguarding and risk assessment to demonstrate that these books adhere to child safeguarding principles under the Children First Act 2015. No doubt you will agree that this is quite remarkable that neither the libraries nor Children's Books Ireland have been able to produce a child safeguarding statement or risk assessment to date on the potential harm to children from being exposed to such sexually explicit material from age 12 upwards. Paragraph 10. With regard to your statement regarding the April 26th assembly at the GPO, On Post has funded the Rainbow Read / Pride Reading List, and one can only assume that they are not fully cognizant that the Pride Reading List does not adhere to child safeguarding principles. With regard to your statement regarding this assembly, I remind you that a public place includes all places to which a member of the public has access. This definition is clearly set out, for example, in the Criminal Justice Public Order Act of 1994. The license regarding its function or trade is irrelevant. Furthermore, your statement that our assembly led to members of An Garda Síochána being called is misleading. In fact, there was no necessity, and it was entirely the choice of the representative of On Post who did so. Had any Garda member believed that anyone present was acting in a manner that constituted some level of public disorder, that member would act accordingly. The fact is that a very peaceful assembly took place with no intimidation or act of even the slightest aggression, contrary to what you suggest. Furthermore, the Gardaí did not escort anyone off the premises. They simply attended at the request of GPO management, and once the speaker was finished, those attending the assembly left. Perhaps this does not suit your narrative that you state as fact, however. These are the true facts. Paragraph 11. Ms. Smith's bias is highlighted by the fact that she dismisses the assault on me by merely referring to a counter-protester throwing water. You refer to events surrounding an assembly at the Department of Education on May 10, 2023. You have stated that a counter-protester threw water at a member of our group, and it is shocking to me that you skirt over an assault on me by a very angry young man who ran at me and threw an unknown liquid at me, despite it being only water and ice. To my knowledge, could have been anything. This was a premeditated and unprovoked attack on me simply because I was speaking about the protection of children. I have no doubt that if a male counter-protester had approached a woman speaking out in an assembly that Ms. Smith agreed with and assaulted her by throwing water in such an aggressive manner, it would be reported in a different light. You clearly have no interest in reporting on this unprovoked, deliberate assault on a woman put in fear by being attacked with an unknown substance. Instead, you make a baseless and false allegation that this man was subsequently kicked by a member of our group. If any person attending this assembly attempted to apprehend the man who attacked me, it had nothing to do with what you refer to as our group. No member of our group attacked anyone, nor did any of us witness such an attack. It is quite shocking that we have come to such a place in society where a national broadcaster such as RTE finds it perfectly acceptable for a man in a dress to assault a woman in such a manner. I assume that you will include this assault upon me in your report about events surrounding such assemblies. After all, this is in the public interest. Paragraph 12. I am somewhat confused why you have referred to named individuals who were present at library campaign assemblies in relation to other protests they may have attended on other issues such as immigration and COVID vaccines. Yet again, Ms. Smith is demonstrating bias and prejudice by conflating the library campaign to other political and current issues. No doubt RTE Primetime will be making the assertion that the library campaign is tied in with the far right. Such labeling is used by a mainstream media in order to undermine legitimacy of concerns by members of the public in certain issues of paramount importance. With regard to my social media accounts, I wish to remind Ms. Smith of my right to freedom of expression and to hold my own beliefs, which include the impact of reckless government policy on migration, which is causing chaos in our society and severely impacting on our communities, our healthcare and educational systems, among others, amidst a crippling housing crisis, particularly when our government is ignoring the provisions of the Lisbon Treaty, the Dublin III regulation, the provisions of the International Protection Act of 2015, and the UN Refugee Convention of 1951, and have entered a voluntary pact with the EU while accepting many thousands of undocumented and unvetted people, a fact which RTE Primetime will not broadcast discussion or debate on. I believe that, as a journalist, Ms. Smith would benefit from focusing on an impartial, accurate, and truthful investigation and broadcast of an issue that exposes children to potential harm, rather than what can only be described as an attempt as a smear campaign against me as an individual. It is quite apparent that the only reason that this is being done is because the library campaign has gained such momentum at a grassroots level by so many people that are concerned for child safeguarding. On a final note, RTE have shown, particularly over the past 3 years, that it is not impartial or transparent. I am fully aware of the fact that what RTE Primetime is trying to do is vilify me as a mother of a boy and a girl simply because I am standing up to protect the welfare of children. The public libraries have failed to demonstrate that they adhere to child safeguarding principles before promoting the Pride reading books in the children's section. Unfortunately, the correspondence from Una Smith further highlights that RTE Primetime intends to broadcast on this matter without properly investigating the central issue, which is the welfare of all children. I trust that you will find this to be a full and detailed response to your correspondence, and since you offered to conduct an interview, I trust you will find the time to include my full response in your segment, particularly in the interest of impartial and fair broadcasting. If you do not do so, I will ensure that the public is made fully aware of this exchange. Sincerely, Jana, London. And I've enclosed a few books as well in the RTE letter. I've included some excerpts from Juno Dawson, What's the Tea? Juno Dawson, This Book is Gay. Sex, Nicole Hasser, Sex, An Uncensored Guide, and Laurie Nunn's Sex Education Guide to Life, and Alan Fox Fisher, Trans Teen Survival Guide. It's getting dark now. I may not be able to read the specifics, but in Juno Dawson, What's the Tea? It does talk about some actions with anal sex, blowjobs, oral sex, going down, shagging and screwing and using lubricant. This book was taken out from Fingal County Library. That's Juno Dawson's What's the Tea? And this booklet of library books was provided to Una Smith ahead of the RTE Primetime broadcast. The next book I have in here is Juno Dawson, This Book is Gay. The most concerning thing about this book, in addition to talking about handies being what a good handy is and a bad handy, again, for age 12, letting a guy come in your mouth and bumming, what's really alarming in this book is that there's a little article on or chapter on how sex apps work. So it teaches children age 12 to 17 how to use Grindr. Step 1, upload a tiny picture of yourself to the app. Step 2, the app works out your location. Step 3, the app tells you who your nearest homosexual is. Step 4, you can then chat to them. And step 5, because they're near, you can meet up with them. Now, personally, I'm not comfortable with an age 12 learning how to use a dating app to meet up with adults. Why would an adult, which the Grindr app is for age 18, why would an adult want to meet an age 12-year-old child? That would be a pedophile, and I'll call that like it is. The next book here is one that I recently on the Natural Women's Council did an interview with our nurse, Natalie, on her meeting with the doctors from PRA. This is, actually, no, this is a different one. Sorry, getting them all mixed up. This one is Sex, an Uncensored Introduction by Nicole Hassler. And this is the famous one that talks about fisting. So Una Smith and her RTE Primetime team, in featuring me and my new type of protest, have all this information. They had information ahead of Primetime showing that there are books in the age 12 to 17 section, which funny enough, our libraries call young adult. Age 12 and 17 is not young adult. Adult, as defined by the Children First Act, is 18 and over. So this particular book talks about fisting. So you can take that out if you want to read more about that. The next book I provided Una Smith and RTE Primetime production team. I did copy all of the board of management on this email back as well. So all of RTE's executives and management also had this letter that I just read, that 8-page letter, and copies of all of these books with the material that we're campaigning against. This book is Laurie Nunn. It's called Sex Education, A Guide to Life. Now, one thing to note is this is also on Netflix, and on Netflix it's rated age 18 and over. Yet in the libraries in Ireland, it is in the age 12 to 17 section. So that's really interesting. It talks about things like trying dry humping. Don't worry if foreplay or sex isn't great every time. Tell your other half what you enjoy and masturbate in the shower. So I'm not really comfortable with an age 12 learning to tell their other half what they enjoy, because an age 12 should not be having sex, since the age of consent is 17. And the next book, this is the book that our nurse from the Natural Women's Council, Natalie, did on our YouTube channel. If you haven't seen that, regarding her meeting with the doctors from HPRA. This book is by Owl and Fox Fisher, called The Trans Teen Survival Guide. That's the cover there. This was provided to RTE, and it talks about how getting hormones online. So age 12 to 17 can get hormones online, and it has little pictures of how to inject those hormones. And the doctors from HPRA were very concerned, very shocked when this was presented to them. However, they must have also got the memo from the top down, and they just dismissed the claim and said, can't do anything about it. So this book's also in the shelf if your age 12 to 17 wants to learn how to order hormones and puberty blockers and things online, and it shows them how to clean and swab the area, pinch the skin, and stick the needle in. So just to confirm why I did this tonight, I wanted to share with you, particularly it hasn't set well with me over the last few weeks, seeing all the scandal with RTE. Now, we've known over the last few years that RTE has not been impartial or transparent in their reporting. We've known that they have pushed the government propaganda, particularly with the Tubridy salary issue and all the other investigations going on. So I felt morally obligated to share the letter that RTE sent to me, and morally obligated to tell the public the letter that I sent back to RTE. Because the more I thought about it, it just didn't sit right that RTE, who has their own child safeguarding statement, RTE are failing to safeguard children. They know about an issue from my 8-page letter that you had the pleasure of hearing, and the booklet of books that we're campaigning against. Yet instead of reporting on Primetime about the content of the books, looking into what is this group of teachers and mothers and fathers campaigning against, rather than look at what we were concerned with, and I even provided them with all that material, instead they focused on the new form of protest, the far right. And if you listen to that RTE Primetime from a few weeks ago, the panel at the end must have used the word hate over half a dozen times. And keep in mind, they're trying to push that hate speech law through. So this was, again, another attempt by RTE to push the government propaganda, to push through the justification of stopping protests, stopping assemblies, stopping free speech, because it's all about, it's all about the hate that we're spreading. Nothing to do with really the matter is the child safeguarding issue. So RTE, we will hold you to account for failing to safeguard children. You have been negligent. You have not followed your own safeguarding statement. You have broken the Children First Act of 2015 because you are meant to investigate, report, and elevate to TUSLA and Garda Síochána if you're aware of children's abuse, including sexual abuse. And you have been provided with all of the documents from myself that children are being sexually abused. Look it up. It's in the Children First Act under sexual abuse. Children are being sexually abused, and you are neglecting to report on it. You'd rather call us far-right, extremist, and full of hate. Shame on you, RTE. Why don't you get back to doing some investigative reporting? Have a great night, and go check these books out for yourself. And the last plug I will get in for anyone watching is we have a very peaceful assembly, peaceful, not extreme, not full of hate, a peaceful assembly taking place on July 11th outside Leinster House at 12 o'clock noon. We have a panel of expert speakers, including lawyers and teachers and parents, to speak out about what is happening in schools. Many of you are helping pass out these leaflets. There's now 170,000 of these in circulation. So these are leaflets for parents to see what changes are coming to the curriculum. The biggest concern being the sexually explicit SPHE program, which includes gender ideology, teaching your boy they can become a girl, boy, girl, neither or both. Teaching your girl she can become a boy, girl, neither or both. We have big concerns with this, and we're standing up at July 11th at 12 o'clock. So we hope to see you there. And thank you very much. Please share this video so everyone in Ireland can see the propaganda machine RTE and their failure to safeguard children. Thanks very much.